Amber always walked fast, not because she was in a hurry, but because she had dreams chasing her, dreams she couldn't afford to lose. Every morning, she tied her braids back with the same worn-out ribbon and took a deep breath before stepping out into the world. Her workshop was tiny, squeezed between a corner shop and a faded beauty salon, but it was hers. She sewed with her whole soul. Each stitch was a promise to herself. Someday, I'll leave this place. Someday, I'll matter. That morning was supposed to be important. A potential client, one of the big ones, had agreed to meet with her at a nearby hotel. She wore her best handmade dress and carried her portfolio in a second-hand tote bag. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the wind felt different, sharp, restless. Halfway through the walk, a luxury SUV stood awkwardly on the roadside, hood open, smoke rising. A man in a suit stood beside it, waving his phone, clearly frustrated. Amber wouldn't have stopped until she saw the group. 4 young men, pretending to be helpful at first, but she could see the way their eyes moved. She recognized the danger. One of them had slipped a hand into his jacket. Another circled around behind the man. Amber felt her heartbeat speed up. She didn't know why she stepped in. She just did. "Hey!" she shouted, walking up like she belonged there. "Sir, the tow truck's on its way. I called them again. They'll be here in 10 minutes. The man looked confused, then caught on. She moved closer to him, slipping between him and the guy behind. "Leave now," she said quietly to the group. "Police pass here often. You don't want trouble." One of them laughed. "Who are you? His wife?" Amber didn't flinch. "Number. But I've got better aim than you think." She pulled out the small sewing scissors from her bag, holding them like a knife. Her hand didn't shake. Her eyes told the truth. The boys looked at each other, grumbled, and walked away. Silence followed. Then the man turned to her. "You all right?" she asked. "I think you just saved me," he said slowly. His voice was deep, calm. "Thank you." She nodded. "You might want to call your driver next time." He smiled, the kind of smile that felt rare. "He's off today. Thought I could handle one meeting alone." He held out his hand. "Jacob." She hesitated before taking it. "Amber." He looked at her like he was trying to remember everything about her. Jacob's meeting was clearly over. Whatever he was heading to, he missed it. And Amber's client? Gone too. She checked the time. No way she could still make it. But Jacob insisted on buying her tea at a small café nearby. It was the least he could do, he said. They sat across from each other, a strange silence hanging between 2 strangers who had just collided. "So," he finally said, "do you save strangers often?" "Only when they look hopeless enough." He laughed. Amber studied him. Expensive suit, designer watch, and an air of someone used to getting what he wanted. But there was something else too. A tiredness. A loneliness, maybe. "What do you do?" he asked. "I sew," she said simply. "Clothing, mostly for women." "Professionally?" "As professionally as a one-woman workshop allows." He raised an eyebrow. "You got a card?" She handed him one, a little worn, handwritten. He turned it over thoughtfully. "You free tomorrow?" She blinked. "Why?" "I run a company, real estate, but we're launching a lifestyle brand. Fashion, interiors, the whole thing. We need someone like you." She frowned. "You've known me 10 minutes. "I know sincerity when I see it," he said. "And courage. You didn't run. That says more than a resume." Amber wasn't sure whether to laugh or run, but something inside her whispered, "This is it. This is the door." The next day, she showed up at the address he gave her. It wasn't just a company, it was a skyscraper. Glass walls, security guards, receptionists who looked like they walked out of fashion magazines. She felt like an alien stepping into a spaceship. But Jacob was waiting. He gave her a tour, introduced her to people, even showed her a design room. Clean, bright, beautiful. And then he looked at her like she was supposed to be there. "We'd like you to head this department. Clothing line. Your style, your touch. I'll pair you with a team. You'll lead." Amber stared at him. "This feels impossible." Impossible is what makes it worth it. Over the next few weeks, she visited more often. Meetings turned into brainstorming sessions. Lunches became conversations. She started noticing how he listened, really listened, and how he made her laugh without trying. He never treated her like she didn't belong. Even when she doubted herself, he didn't. And every time she stepped into the elevator to leave, she caught herself thinking, when did he stop being just a man I helped? It was on one of those late afternoons, as the sky turned orange, that he asked her, "Do you ever feel like the universe is trying to tell you something?" She looked up. "Like what?" "Like, we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Amber didn't answer, but her heart did. Amber adjusted the seam of a deep green dress, the kind that caught the light just right. Her fingers moved with practiced grace, her mind already imagining how the final piece would flow. It was her third week working in Jacob's design department, and her world had turned upside down, but in the most beautiful way. Each morning she entered the gleaming tower, still feeling a little like a visitor, but a little less each day. Her name was now printed on the glass door of the design room, Amber Ease, lead creative consultant. She had a desk, a sewing station, and a team of young designers who hung on her every word. But it wasn't just the job. It was Jacob. He'd stop by unexpectedly, bringing tea or ideas or both. Sometimes they talked about fabric textures, sometimes about books, once about childhood. "Did you ever sew doll clothes when you were little?" he asked her one day. "No dolls," she smiled. "Just scraps of cloth and imagination. I made dresses for walls, chairs, sometimes myself." He laughed, leaning back in the chair across from her. "Did you ever think you'd end up working in fashion?" she asked him back. "Number I thought I'd build towers and hide inside them." She looked at him curiously. "Why hide?" He paused. "Because it's easier to impress people than to let them see you." Her eyes softened. "Maybe that's why you needed someone who sees." One Thursday evening, after hours, the office was nearly empty. Amber stayed late finishing a prototype. Jacob appeared, sleeves rolled up, holding 2 paper bags. "Dinner?" he asked. She nodded, surprised. "What is it?" "Spicy rice and grilled plantains. I remembered you said you missed home food." They sat on the floor of the studio, eating between mannequins and sketches. "You know," she said between bites, "I never imagined this. Not just the job, this whole world. You." He looked at her quietly. "What did you imagine?" "I thought I'd open a small shop one day, maybe get a few loyal clients, live quietly. That still sounds beautiful." It was enough. But now, she trailed off. "Now?" He gently nudged. "Now I want more. Not because of the money, because of what it feels like to be seen, to be trusted." Jacob smiled, his gaze warm. "You deserve every room you walk into, Amber. Every spotlight, every stage." But the world outside their growing bond didn't stay quiet. Word spread quickly about the girl from the suburbs who caught the eye of Abuja's most eligible bachelor. Rumors swirled, some admiring, some cruel. One morning, she overheard whispers in the elevator. Is it true she used to sew curtains for street vendors? Maybe she saved him just to climb up. She kept her head high, but it stung. Later that day, Jacob found her in the garden terrace, her shoulders tight. "Talk to me," he said. She hesitated, then finally let it spill. They think I don't belong here, that I tricked my way in. He took her hand. Amber, do you know what I saw when I first met you? She didn't answer. I saw a woman who didn't hesitate, who stood in front of danger for someone she didn't know. I've built towers, yes. But you? You built courage into thread. That's rarer than gold. She turned to him, tears in her eyes. But you come from a world where people don't have to prove themselves every day. He cupped her face gently. Then let me be the one who reminds them who you are. A month later, they hosted a private fashion show, her designs on display, her team in charge. The press was there, influencers, editors, investors. Jacob watched from the back row, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her. When Amber stepped out at the end of the show to take a bow, the room erupted in applause. She didn't look at the cameras, she looked at Jacob, and he mouthed just one word: proud. Their lives began to merge in quiet ways. He started dropping by her old workshop on weekends. At first, he just brought her snacks, then tools, then a whole team to help renovate. But he never tried to take it over. He knew it mattered to her that the space stayed hers. She started learning his world too, how deals were made, how buildings were dreamed up on paper before they touched the sky. One evening, he asked her to come to a property site. Why me? She asked. Because I want to build something that feels like you, a space for creators, for dreamers, and I want you to help design it. She stood there, looking at the open land, dust swirling in the golden light. You really believe in me that much? Jacob turned to her. You believed in me when I was stranded on the side of a road. That matters more than anything anyone in a suit has ever said to me. But with closeness came vulnerability. One night, Amber confessed something she had never told anyone. When I was 12, I nearly gave up. My mom worked 3 jobs. We couldn't afford food, let alone thread. I used to sit in the dark and just wish that someone would see that I had something to offer. Jacob listened in silence, then took her hand. Amber, I didn't just see you. I see you still. Every day. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And I see you too, she whispered. Not the billionaire. The man. They sat there, in quiet understanding. 2 lives from different worlds, sewn together, thread by thread. The weather had begun to shift. Abuja's skies had turned a softer blue, the nights cooler, and the days filled with the kind of sunshine that made everything look golden. Jacob and Amber had settled into a rhythm that neither of them had expected, part friendship, part creative partnership, and something else, something waiting just beneath the surface. One afternoon, Jacob invited her to an art exhibition. It's small, private, he said. A friend is showcasing pieces inspired by movement and identity. Thought of you. Amber hesitated. Are you asking me as a friend or as a client? He smiled. Can't I be both? She agreed, nervously. It would be their first time out in public together, without any work attached. The exhibit was held in a sleek gallery with white walls and warm lighting. Jacob wore a casual jacket and jeans for once. Amber wore a cream-colored dress she made herself, stitched with delicate gold thread along the sleeves. As they walked through the space, her arm occasionally brushed his. He leaned in when he spoke to her, and she noticed how often their eyes met and lingered. One sculpture caught her attention. A tall, twisted metal figure reaching toward the sky, a piece of fabric wrapped around its center. The artist says it represents longing, Jacob explained softly beside her. That fabric is a reminder that no matter how high we rise, we're still tied to where we began. Amber stared at it longer than she expected. I feel like that sometimes, like I'm floating, but the ground keeps tugging at my feet. Jacob looked at her with something deeper than admiration. "You're not floating, Amber. You're flying, and I'm just lucky enough to be close enough to see it." Her breath caught. As they stepped out of the gallery that evening, soft jazz music played from a nearby café. The night was calm, and the city lights shimmered like stars come down to dance. "Hungry?" Jacob asked. She nodded. They ended up at a small open-air restaurant tucked behind a row of trees. The air smelled like grilled peppers and charcoal, and laughter floated on the breeze. Jacob insisted she try the pepper soup, and they shared jollof rice straight from the pot. For a while, they didn't talk about work at all. They talked about first loves, awkward school days, favorite childhood snacks. "I used to sneak into my neighbor's yard just to steal mangoes," Amber confessed. Jacob laughed. "I bribed my school's night guard once so I could sneak out to see a girl. I was caught the next morning and had to wash the school van for a week." She grinned. "Was she worth it?" He paused. "I thought she was. Until tonight." Amber blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice low and sincere, "I've never met someone who makes the world feel this honest." The next morning, Amber returned to her old workshop for the first time in weeks. The place was just as she left it, cozy, full of fabric rolls and handwritten notes. But something felt different. She realized she was different. As she cleaned up, a little girl peeked in through the door. "Auntie Amber?" Amber smiled. "Hi, Mimi. I haven't seen you in a while. I told my class that you work in a tower now. They didn't believe me." Amber laughed and knelt to her level. "Well, tell them dreams can be tall like towers, too." Mimi nodded, then pointed at a photo on the wall, a picture of Amber's mother sewing by candlelight. "Is that your mommy?" "Yes. She taught me everything." Later, as Amber sat alone in the silence of the workshop, she looked at that photo for a long time. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago. Amber wondered what she'd say now. Maybe something like, "Don't forget where you come from, but don't ever be afraid to go where you belong." That night, Jacob called. "Come to the rooftop," he said simply. Amber arrived at the top floor of his building just after 9 p.m. The city lay stretched beneath them, glittering and alive. He had set up 2 chairs, a blanket, and a small speaker playing soft acoustic music. "I figured you needed a break," he said. She sat beside him, the night air cool on her arms. "I visited the workshop today," she said. "Good memories?" She nodded. "But also, ghosts. It's strange how moving forward can feel like leaving something behind." Jacob turned to her. "You haven't left anything. You're carrying it all with you. That's what makes you so rare." There was a long pause. Then Amber turned to him. "Why haven't you kissed me?" Jacob's eyes widened slightly. He sat still, stunned, but only for a moment. "Because I didn't want to move too fast. Because I respect you. Because I wanted to be sure you saw me too, not just the man I pretend to be in boardrooms." "I do," she whispered. He leaned closer, slowly, as if giving her time to change her mind. She didn't. Their lips met, soft, searching, full of everything unsaid. The kiss felt like a breath they'd both been holding for too long. When they pulled apart, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you held scissors like a weapon." Amber laughed softly. "And I've wanted to do that since you told me I belonged." They stayed like that under the stars. 2 hearts, once strangers, now beginning to sink, 1 beat at a time. Amber had never been in love before, not truly. There had been crushes and fleeting butterflies, but nothing like this, nothing like the quiet certainty she felt when Jacob looked at her like she was the most real thing in his world. The rooftop kiss lingered in her thoughts for days. It wasn't just the kiss, it was the moment, the piece of it, the unspoken promise. But love, she knew, was not a shield, and it couldn't stop what came next. It started with a headline: Mystery Woman Captures Billionaire's Heart. Who is Amber Ease? Then came the photos. Amber walking into the tower, Amber in a taxi, Amber leaving the workshop with fabric in her arms. The internet lit up with speculation. Some praised her story as Cinderella in real life. Others were cruel. Gold digger. Slum-born seamstress chasing power. This won't last. Amber shut off her phone. She didn't go to work the next day. Jacob called. She didn't answer. On the third day, he showed up at her apartment. She opened the door slowly, dressed in a simple sweatshirt, eyes tired. "I'm sorry," she whispered before he could say anything. "Number." "Don't you dare apologize." She looked away. "I didn't know this would happen." "Neither did I, but I should have seen it coming, and I should have protected you from it." He stepped closer. "I don't care what they say. Let them talk." "I do," she said quietly. "I care because I've spent my whole life trying to prove I belong. And now it feels like I'm being punished for daring to love someone like you." Jacob took her hand. "Then let's remind them who you are." The next day, Amber walked into the tower wearing a deep navy jumpsuit she designed herself, her chin high. Jacob stood beside her as she gave a press statement, not about their relationship, but about her upcoming collection. She spoke about craftsmanship, about heritage, about women who sew in silence and never get the credit. When she finished, the room applauded. And slowly, the story began to shift. The pressure didn't disappear completely, but Amber handled it with quiet grace. Jacob stood by her through it all, but never in front of her, always at her side. Their love grew not in grand gestures, but in small things: shared tea before meetings, his hand lightly on her back when they walked, the way he remembered how she liked her fabric rolled, not folded. He brought her a sewing machine from Paris. She surprised him with a poem stitched into the lining of his blazer. Their worlds no longer felt so different. They were building a bridge, stitch by stitch. One night, during a rainstorm, Amber stayed over at Jacob's penthouse. They sat barefoot on his balcony, the sound of thunder rolling over the hills. "Do you ever miss being unknown?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes. But then I remember how lonely it was." "Was?" He looked at her. "You changed that." Amber leaned into him. "I used to think love was something for other people, for women who wore perfume every day and knew how to flirt." Jacob chuckled. "You flirted with scissors." She laughed too. "Maybe I did." Then her voice turned serious. "I'm afraid, Jacob." "Of what?" "That one day you'll wake up and realize I'm still that girl from the edge of the city." He pulled her close. "I already knew who you were, and I fell for you anyway, not despite that, because of that." She closed her eyes, the rain soft in the background. "I love you," she said. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Jacob didn't hesitate. "I love you too." Weeks passed. Amber's designs gained attention. Her collection sold out before it even launched. She was invited to speak at events, her story now seen as one of resilience, not scandal. Jacob supported her quietly, proudly. One evening, as they stood in her workshop, now renovated and full of light, he asked her to close her eyes. No peeking. She heard the rustle of paper, a box being placed on the table. "Okay," he said softly. "Open." Inside was a single golden thimble, polished and engraved with her initials. She picked it up, touched by the gift. But then she noticed something else inside. A sketch, not of a dress, of a building, A studio. Is this? He nodded. Your own fashion house. I bought the property last week. You can design it however you want. Call it whatever you want. Amber stared at him, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say yes. I haven't even thought that far ahead. Jacob smiled. Then start thinking, because the world already knows your name. Now it's time for them to see what you can build. She looked at him, her heart full. You always do that. Do what? Make the impossible feel possible. That night, as they cleaned up the workshop together, a single light bulb flickered above them. Amber laughed. I still haven't replaced that bulb. Jacob looked up. Maybe it's a sign. A sign of what? He turned to her slowly. There was something different in his eyes, nervous, hopeful. That even when things flicker, they still shine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amber's breath caught. Jacob got down on one knee, right there between bolts of fabric and scattered sketches. Amber Ease, he said, voice steady. You changed my life. You taught me to trust, to feel, to dream again. Will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, simple, elegant, with a tiny needle and thread engraved inside the band. Amber kissed him with laughter in her mouth, joy spilling everywhere. The light bulb flickered once more, and then stayed lit. Amber hadn't dreamed about weddings as a little girl. Her childhood was filled with more real things, patching up school uniforms, boiling water on charcoal stoves, and listening to her mother hum old songs as she stitched late into the night. But now, as she stood inside her newly built studio, a ring on her finger and a vision in her heart, she allowed herself a moment to dream. And her dream looked nothing like the fairy tales. It looked like lace curtains billowing in the Abuja breeze, like fresh hibiscus tea shared over fabric samples, like Jacob watching her from across the room, love soft in his eyes. She was designing her own wedding dress. Of course she was. She didn't want it to be grand or glittering. She wanted it to speak, like her mother's dresses once did. Quiet elegance, threads of memory. It took her 3 weeks just to pick the fabric. She chose raw silk, soft to the touch, and hand-stitched delicate vine patterns across the sleeves, like the plants her mother used to grow in clay pots. Jacob didn't ask to see the dress. He respected her process, just as she respected the pressure he was under. His world had grown louder since the engagement. Shareholders, socialites, sudden expectations. There were magazine requests, interviews, suggestions for venues. Everyone had an opinion. But Jacob only wanted one thing, to marry her in a place that mattered to them, not the world. We could fly somewhere, he offered one evening as they curled up in his study. Italy, Morocco, private, quiet. Amber shook her head. I want to marry you here, where it started. In the middle of a broken-down car and a gang of thieves? She laughed. Exactly. So they chose a small garden tucked behind an old library, where the wind always whispered and jacaranda trees dropped purple petals on the ground. The wedding planning was intimate, almost sacred. Amber handmade every invitation, wax sealing each one with their initials. She asked her old neighbors to help cook, not caterers, friends, people who knew how to mix pepper soup the way her mother liked it. Jacob had his staff offer their services, but Amber gently declined. She wanted this to be theirs, not borrowed from luxury. When Jacob's assistant, Daniel, suggested a luxury wedding planner from London, Jacob only smiled. Amber is the planner. Daniel blinked. She's also the bride. And the best designer I've ever met. Trust me, she can handle magic. 1 week before the wedding, a storm hit the city. Amber stood at the edge of her studio, watching the clouds turn silver gray. Rain poured against the windows. Thunder cracked above the rooftops. Then, snap, the power went out. She stood in silence, heart sinking. The dress, the candles, the delicate beadwork. Jacob showed up 10 minutes later, flashlight in hand. "You good?" Amber nodded, even though her eyes shimmered. "It's just, everything's so fragile right now." He set the flashlight down, cupped her face in his palms. "So are flowers, and you don't see them panicking every time the rain comes." She laughed through her tears. "I love you. I love you too." They lit candles and sewed by hand, together. The day before the wedding, Amber visited her mother's grave. The sun was gentle that morning, and the ground soft beneath her feet. She brought a bundle of wildflowers, yellow, pink, and white, the kind her mother used to pick from the roadside. She sat in silence for a long time, fingers tracing the carved name. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm getting married tomorrow." The wind stirred. "You would have liked him. He's kind. He's strong. He listens." Her voice broke slightly. "I still sew the way you taught me. I still hum your song when I need to think." She placed a folded square of the dress's fabric beside the flowers. "You're in every stitch." She stayed there until the sun rose high. Then she whispered goodbye and walked away, her heart both aching and full. The night before the wedding, Jacob couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony, looking over the city. It amazed him how much had changed in so little time, how a broken-down car, a fearless seamstress, and one decision had reshaped everything. Daniel found him there. "Nervous?" the assistant asked. Jacob smiled, terrified. Daniel nodded. "She's different, not like the others." "She's everything the others weren't." "Then don't mess it up." "I won't." Jacob turned toward the night sky. "I've never been more sure of anything." On the morning of the wedding, the jacaranda trees bloomed like a blessing. Purple petals covered the ground like soft snow. The sun came out. The clouds stayed away. Amber arrived in a small car with her closest friends. No fancy limo, just laughter, perfume, and the scent of coconut oil. Her dress moved like water. Her hair was pinned with small silver pins that sparkled only when she turned. Jacob stood under the biggest tree, wearing a traditional white tunic with gold embroidery. His hands were steady, but his breath caught the second he saw her. She walked slowly, eyes only on him. No music played, only the wind and the soft gasp of those watching. When she reached him, he took her hands. "You look like a miracle," he whispered. She smiled. "You found me in the middle of nowhere. And I'll never let go." They exchanged vows written by hand. Amber's voice was clear. "I promise to see you, not your wealth, not your reputation, just you. The man who stayed when things got hard, the man who never tried to change me." Jacob's vow was simpler. "I promise to protect your joy like it's my own, to walk beside you through rain, wind, and fire, and to never forget the woman who taught me how to feel again." Tears fell. Laughter followed, and when they kissed, the wind rose gently, as if to lift them higher. Petals danced in the air, and the world, for a moment, stood still. Married life didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt better. It felt like warm tea at dawn while the city yawned awake, like shared calendars pinned to the fridge, mismatched socks, and dance parties in the kitchen to old Afrobeat songs, like deep conversations at 2 a.m. and laughing until their cheeks hurt. Amber and Jacob built a rhythm, not glamorous, but theirs. There were still challenges. Marriage didn't erase the noise of the world or the differences between their pasts, but it gave them a reason to keep trying. a reason to stay soft when the world tried to harden them. Amber kept working at her studio, which she named Thread and Grace. Her first full collection launched under that name just 3 months after the wedding. It sold out in a week. Every design told a story. One dress was inspired by the wind that brought Jacob into her life. Another by the old songs her mother used to hum while sewing. She made clothes that spoke to women like her, quiet warriors with calloused hands and bright eyes. She refused to chase trends. Instead, she built meaning into every stitch. Jacob often visited the studio, not to interfere, but just to watch. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes flowers, and sometimes he simply sat and smiled, watching her in her element. One afternoon, as Amber adjusted a hemline, he said, "You've created more than a business. You've created a movement." Amber glanced up, her hands still busy. "I just make dresses." Number you give people something to believe in. Jacob's empire didn't slow down either. In fact, it grew. But his priorities shifted. He began to invest more in local projects, schools, housing, workshops for young creatives. He told his board, "If we can build towers, we can build futures too." Some investors were skeptical, but he didn't flinch. Amber's influence showed in his decisions. She never asked him to change. He just did. He spoke differently now, with more heart, less polish, more purpose. One night, after a charity event, they lay side by side in bed, too wired to sleep. "I want to do more," he said. "You already are." "No, I mean, with you. Together. A foundation, for girls like you once were. Artists. Dreamers." Amber's eyes softened. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." They kissed under the soft hum of the ceiling fan, their bodies pressed close, dreams overlapping. Not everything was smooth. Fame still lingered like a shadow. Sometimes strangers took photos of Amber without asking. Sometimes her family, distant cousins, old classmates, showed up asking for help, money, connections. She struggled with guilt, with boundaries. One day, after a long call with a relative she hadn't spoken to in years, she broke down. "I feel like they only love me now because I married you." Jacob pulled her close. "They loved you before. They just didn't know how to show it. And now? Now they're learning. And if they don't, you still have me." The hardest part came unexpectedly. It was the day Amber found out she might not be able to have children. She sat in the sterile doctor's office, the white walls too quiet. Jacob held her hand tightly as the doctor explained words like low reserve and complicated odds. Amber didn't cry there, not until they got home. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at a bowl of oranges, and then the tears came. "I had names picked out," she whispered, "before I even met you." Jacob wrapped his arms around her, silent at first. Then he whispered, "So did I." They stood like that for a long time. And when the storm passed, they sat on the floor, leaning against the cabinets, fingers intertwined. "We can try," he said. "And if it doesn't happen, we'll love each other anyway. We'll love others too. There's more than one way to build a family." Amber nodded slowly. "Okay." Weeks passed. Life returned to its gentle rhythm. Amber kept designing. Jacob kept building. They laughed again, held hands in public again, talked about adoption someday, talked about traveling, maybe next year, talked about planting a tree in their backyard. One evening, they went to a small café to celebrate 6 months of marriage. They ordered jollof rice and suya, their favorite drinks, and laughed about how awkward their first meeting had been. "You with your stubborn car," Amber said. "You with your fearless mouth," Jacob replied, smiling. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked suddenly. He tilted his head. "I didn't, not until you." She smiled. Me neither. They clinked glasses. To fate. That night, Jacob gave her a small gift box. Inside was a simple necklace, gold, with a charm shaped like a needle and thread. Amber gasped softly. I had it custom made, he said. You wear the ring to show you're mine. This is to show the world I'm yours. She kissed him, her eyes shining. They walked home slowly, fingers intertwined. The city lights sparkled, and for once, everything felt still, whole, exactly as it was meant to be. The months that followed were like a quilt, patches of warmth sewn beside threads of uncertainty. Amber had learned not to count days by calendars, but by moments. The scent of freshly baked chin-chin from the neighbor's shop, the sound of rain tapping the studio's roof, Jacob's quiet humming when he read late at night. Then came the morning the test turned positive. She stood in the bathroom, barefoot, staring at the little window that slowly bloomed with a pink line. Her heart stopped, then raced. She took the test again. Same result. The air around her vibrated, as if the world were holding its breath. She walked out of the bathroom, stick in hand, and stood in front of Jacob, who was buttoning his shirt, already halfway into his workday mind. He looked up. Her hands trembled. Jacob. He saw the test, and something in his face cracked wide open. He didn't speak, just pulled her into him. They stood like that, chest to chest, as if trying to feel their baby's heartbeat between them. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Amber had to slow down, something she wasn't used to. Her body, once so precise and reliable, now moved to a different rhythm. Nausea, dizziness, days where even lifting a pin felt like too much. Jacob became her shield. He cut his work hours, set up a daybed in the studio, hired someone to help with production, though Amber still insisted on approving every piece that left the building. She grew softer, rounder, more quiet, but not less strong. One night, curled up in bed, she whispered, "What if I'm not ready?" Jacob didn't answer right away. Then he touched her belly, gently, reverently. "You already are. You just don't know it yet." They didn't announce the pregnancy publicly. Amber wasn't interested in being a headline. Jacob honored that. They told family, close friends, Daniel. The world would find out in time. In the privacy of their little home, they built a nursery together. Sunny yellow walls, soft rugs, and a rocking chair Amber insisted on sanding and staining herself. Jacob read to her belly every night. Children's books, psalms, love letters he never sent. The baby kicked for the first time during one of those readings. Jacob froze mid-sentence, eyes wide. "Did you feel that?" Amber grinned. "Looks like someone likes your voice." "I'm going to cry," he whispered, blinking too fast. At 7 months, something shifted. "You already are." Amber woke in the middle of the night, her stomach tight, her breath short. She called for Jacob. He rushed in, saw her curled over, and didn't hesitate. He carried her to the car, barefoot, shirt half-buttoned. They drove through silent streets, headlights slicing through the dark. At the hospital, machines beeped. Nurses moved quickly. A doctor frowned at charts. "Early labor signs," he said, "but we can manage it." Amber stayed in the hospital for 4 days. Jacob never left her side. He slept on a hard chair, held her hand through every contraction that didn't become labor. On the 3rd night, she looked at him through tired eyes. "You're not scared?" "I'm terrified," he said softly, "but not of this, only of losing you." She reached for his hand. "We're okay, just a few more weeks. I'd wait forever." She carried the baby full term. On a warm April morning, just as the jacarandas bloomed again, their daughter arrived. Amber cried before she even saw her, just from hearing the first cry, strong, high, defiant. Jacob cut the cord with shaking hands. They named her Eliana, which means God has answered. And he had. Life changed again. The studio paused for a while. Clients understood. Amber spent her days in a soft robe, hair tied back, learning the rhythm of her daughter's breath. Feedings, naps, first smiles. Jacob became the master of diaper duty. He made up lullabies that made no sense, but Eliana adored them. Their world grew smaller and infinitely bigger at once. Sometimes they sat together on the porch at sunset, baby sleeping in Amber's arms. "We're a family now," she whispered. Jacob kissed her shoulder. "We always were." "No. Now we've stitched in a new thread." One night, Amber got up to feed the baby and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Tired eyes, messy bun, stretch marks across her belly. But she didn't look away. She saw the story behind every mark, every shadow under her eyes. This was the woman who survived heartbreak, who risked everything to help a stranger, who turned scraps of fabric into art, who learned how to love and be loved without shrinking. She didn't just see a mother, she saw a masterpiece. When she came back to bed, Jacob stirred. "Everything okay?" Amber nodded. "She's perfect." "So are you." He pulled her close. They fell asleep, skin to skin, the baby's gentle breath the only sound between them. Weeks later, Amber stood in her studio again. The sewing machine was silent. The space felt different now, as if it was waiting. She walked to the center of the room, opened her sketchbook, and began to draw. A new collection, inspired by motherhood, strength, softness, by the quiet power of becoming. She titled it Eliana. The first dress she designed had wide sleeves, like open arms, and a sash that wrapped gently around the waist, like a hug. She smiled. This was just the beginning. A year passed. Eliana learned to walk, tiny wobbly steps across the living room rug, arms outstretched like wings. Her laughter became the soundtrack of the house. Amber's new collection, Eliana, debuted at a private show. Jacob sat in the front row, Eliana on his lap in a tiny dress her mother had sewn by hand. The final piece, an ivory gown with soft flowing fabric, made the room go silent. It was more than fashion. It was emotion, movement, memory. After the show, someone whispered to Amber, "You've changed the conversation." Amber smiled. "I didn't come to speak. I came to listen." They bought a small plot of land on the outskirts of the city, quiet, filled with trees and evening light. They designed the house together. Amber wanted a big kitchen with windows that opened wide. Jacob asked for a library and a garden where Eliana could play barefoot. The house wasn't a mansion. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to hold them. They moved in the following spring. The house filled with books, music, thread, fabric, half-drawn sketches, toddler toys, love. It was messy and perfect. On their second anniversary, Jacob told Amber to dress up. "No questions," he said, grinning. He took her to the very hilltop where they'd first kissed. A canopy had been set up, surrounded by glowing lanterns, a small table with their favorite food, music playing softly in the background. Amber gasped. "You remembered this place? How could I forget?" They sat and ate slowly, the way people do when they want the night to last longer. The stars above them burned bright, scattered across the sky like sequins. "I have something for you," Jacob said, reaching into his jacket. Amber laughed. "You're not proposing again, are you? Because I already said yes." He smiled and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not new, but different. On it, 3 stones, one for her, one for him, one for Eliana. Amber stared, moved beyond words. "I just wanted you to know," he said. This story, it keeps growing. She slipped the ring on and leaned into him. I love you, she whispered. I love you more, he replied. You can't. I invented love. He laughed, holding her hand. Then thank you for creating it. Later that night, after they put Eliana to bed, they sat together outside their new home. The garden was quiet. The city lights flickered in the distance. Amber looked up at the stars. Do you ever wonder how we got here? Jacob thought for a moment. I think we followed the signs and held on when it mattered most. She nodded. You know, sometimes I still feel like that girl with the sewing machine and the leaky roof. You are her, he said. That's why I fell in love with you. She looked at him. And who are you now? He smiled. A man lucky enough to be sewn into your story. Amber eventually expanded her studio, opened a mentorship program for young girls with dreams stitched into their fingers, girls like she once was. She called the program The Needle and the Star, because sometimes the thread that holds us together is the same one that leads us forward. Jacob built a community hub near their home, part library, part café, part innovation space, free to the public, full of light. They didn't call it charity, they called it giving back what had always belonged to the people. Their love didn't become less exciting, it became deeper. It was found in the quiet passing of a teacup, in knowing glances across a noisy dinner table, in shared silence, heavy with understanding. Sometimes they argued about small things, big things, but they always came back, always chose each other, because their love wasn't just passion, it was a decision, made every morning and again every night. Years later, Eliana would ask how her parents met. Amber would smile and say, a car broke down, a gust of wind, a choice. Jacob would add, and a girl who wasn't afraid to stand up when it mattered most. Eliana would laugh and shake her head. That sounds made up. Amber would wink. All the best stories do. But this one? This one was real. It was sewn from courage and stitched with grace. It danced between skyscrapers and market stalls, between stormy nights and clear mornings. It whispered through fabric and echoed across concrete. It lived in a tiny studio and a wide, starry sky. And in the end, it wasn't just about love. It was about what love could build together.